Welcome to Inherited Revenge. Sit back, relax, and get ready for stories full of drama, twists, and sweet revenge. Let's dive in. The nurse looked at my chart, frowned, and said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. Your insurance was terminated 3 days ago." Actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I had poison dripping into my veins through a clear plastic tube, I had lost half my hair, I had thrown up in a hospital sink that same morning, and I still believed my husband would never do something that cruel. "That can't be right," I told her. "My husband handles the policy." She gave me that slow, careful look medical people use when they know your life is about to split open. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "It says the spouse removed you voluntarily." Voluntarily. I was in chemo. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Because what happened after that was worse than the cancer. My name is Elena Whitmore, and for 14 years I was the woman who kept everything standing while everyone else got credit for the house not collapsing. I met Greg when I was 27 and he was 31. All polished shoes and easy charm and that voice men use when they want to sound dependable. He worked in medical device sales. Good money. Nice watch. Nice smile. The kind of man my mother called safe. I was a high school guidance counselor then, still paying off student loans, still thinking love meant building something together. Greg loved that idea too, at least in public. In public I was his rock, his angel, his best friend. In private I was his assistant with a wedding ring. I remembered every birthday, every mortgage payment, every dentist appointment, every teacher conference for his son Mason from his first marriage. Mason was 9 when I came into his life. Quiet and watchful and always waiting to see if I would disappear like the others. I didn't. I learned he liked his pancakes with peanut butter, not syrup. I learned he hated thunder but pretended not to. I learned that if you sat on the edge of his bed and rubbed his back in slow circles, he could fall asleep in less than 6 minutes. Greg got the Father of the Year applause. I did the actual parenting. That was our marriage in one sentence. His family made it worse. His mother, Patricia, treated me like I was lucky to be allowed inside their bloodline. At Thanksgiving she'd hand Greg the carved turkey knife like he was a king and ask me to refill the gravy. When Mason made honor roll she posted photos of Greg with captions about sacrifice and legacy. I was cropped out so often it became a joke among my friends. Greg always said the same thing. "That's just how she is." That sentence can ruin a woman's life if she hears it long enough. That's just how she is. That's just how he talks. That's just how marriage works. By the time I was 38, I was handling almost everything. Greg had switched jobs twice. I kept our finances stable. I refinanced the house when his commissions dipped. I used an inheritance from my aunt to cover Mason's private tutoring when his grades slipped after his mother moved to Arizona. I sold my grandmother's bracelet to help pay for Greg's startup investment when he swore it would triple in a year. It collapsed in 9 months. He never apologized. He just said we'd recover. Funny word, we. Then I found the lump. It was late October, 7:40 in the morning, and I was toweling off after a shower when my hands stopped. Hard. Unfamiliar. Wrong. By Thanksgiving I had a biopsy. By the first week of December I had a diagnosis. Stage 2 breast cancer, aggressive, fast-growing, treatable if we moved quickly. Treatable. That word became my religion. Surgery in January. Chemo starting in February. 6 rounds planned. 18 weeks. I remember sitting in the car outside the oncology center, staring at the calendar on my phone and telling myself I could survive anything in 18 weeks. But Greg changed the second my illness became inconvenient. First he played the good husband. He came to the first appointment, held my hand in the waiting room, posted a filtered photo of our fingers intertwined with the caption, "We fight together." Hundreds of likes. Praying hands. Red hearts. At home though he was irritated by the noise of my vomiting. Irritated by the copays. Irritated that I was too tired to cook. He started sleeping in the guest room because my medicines made the bedroom smell clinical. That's the word he used. Clinical. As if I were a mess to be managed, not a wife trying to stay alive. Then the bills started getting strange. One infusion that should have cost a few hundred out of pocket was suddenly marked pending review. A scan was delayed because the insurer needed updated authorization. Greg brushed it off every time. "Insurance companies are a disaster," he said. "I'm handling it." I wanted to believe him. When you are fighting for your body, You want to believe the person beside you is fighting for everything else. But that morning in the chemo chair when the nurse told me my coverage had been cancelled, something in me went still. Not shattered. So, the kind of stillness that comes before a building falls. I called Greg from the treatment room. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, "Why was my insurance terminated?" No response. 32 minutes later, while I sat there with saline dripping into my arm because they would not start the drugs without payment approval, he sent 4 words. "We need to talk tonight." That's when everything changed. I didn't wait for night. I called the insurer myself. I sat in that vinyl recliner with a blanket over my knees and listened to hold music until a woman named Denise came on the line. Her voice was soft, almost too soft. She told me the policyholder had called the prior week and reported a qualifying life change. Legal separation. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I would faint. "I'm not legally separated," I said. Denise went quiet for a beat too long. Then she said, "Ma'am, I can only tell you what was submitted." Submitted. Signed. Process. He hadn't forgotten to pay. He hadn't mixed up paperwork. He had used a lie to cut me off. And then I found out why. That same afternoon, while begging the billing office for time, I checked the bank account Greg and I shared for household expenses. There were 2 charges from a downtown jewelry store, one from a boutique hotel, and a plane ticket to Napa booked for 2 travelers leaving the following Friday. He was not just abandoning me. He was financing the next part of his life while mine sat attached to an 4-pole. I still went home that night. I still waited for him at the kitchen table. Sometimes betrayal is so big your mind needs to look it in the face to understand it is real. Greg came in at 8:14, loosened his tie, saw my expression and didn't even pretend for long. He said he was tired. He said my illness had changed everything. He said he couldn't keep living in fear and debt. I had used my savings to keep the house running when his commissions dried up. I had paid for Mason's braces. I had covered his business failure. But now I was debt. Then he said the ugliest part. "I didn't think you'd notice until the next billing cycle." I still hear that sentence in my sleep. Not if, but, not wonder. But he calculated how long he could leave me uninsured before chemo exposed him. I asked if there was someone else. He looked away. That was answer enough. Her name was Kendra. 34. Worked in event planning. Liked posting photos with captions about peace and alignment and choosing joy. I found that out later. That night, I only knew my husband had looked at a woman in a hospital headscarf and decided she was too expensive to keep alive comfortably. I asked him to leave. He refused. Said the house was in both our names. So I left instead. I packed 1 suitcase, my medications, and the gray blanket Mason had bought me with his own money from a school fundraiser. He was 17 then, old enough to understand something bad had happened, young enough to still be stuck under his father's roof. He stood at the front door with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry." I kissed his forehead and told him none of this was his fault. Then I drove myself to my sister Nora's apartment with 1 breast scar, 1 active tumor site and no health insurance. Those months were brutal. Not inspiring. Brutal. Nora cleared out her home office so I could sleep near the bathroom. I applied for emergency continuation coverage, hospital charity care, state assistance, anything with a form and a phone number. I spent hours on hold while my bones ached from treatment. I vomited into grocery bags in parking lots. I lost 11 pounds in 5 weeks. My eyebrows disappeared. My skin went gray. Kept going. Because the thing nobody tells you is this. Once someone tries to make your survival inconvenient, surviving becomes personal. I sold my car and bought an old used sedan for cash. I cashed out a retirement fund and paid for 2 infusions out of pocket until the emergency appeal went through. I documented everything. Every cancellation notice. Every bank transfer. Every lie Greg told by text. Every date. Every timestamp. And while I was fighting to stay alive, I also did something else. I rebuilt. I started remote college advising from Nora's dining room between treatments. Then I turned that into a private education consulting business for overwhelmed parents with kids applying to top schools. I knew the system. I knew scholarships. I knew how to write essays that opened doors. In a year I had 12 clients. In 2 years 30. In 4 years I had an office, 3 consultants and contracts with 2 private schools. I was the woman families hired when they wanted someone who noticed everything. Deadlines. Missing transcripts. Quiet panic in a teenager's face. I became successful in a life I never planned because the old one tried to bury me. But Greg never admitted what he did. Publicly, he told people our marriage collapsed under the strain of illness. That soft, cowardly sentence. Patricia backed him, of course. She told relatives I had become unstable on medication. Greg married Kendra 2 years after the divorce. I found out through tagged photos online. Vineyard wedding. White roses. Mason in a navy suit, smiling like someone trying hard not to split in two. Greg looked happy. I looked away. I survived chemo. Then radiation. Then 5 years of scans that made my stomach twist every single time. Pling, pling, pling. Those were the sweetest words I ever heard, and still they changed nothing in Greg's world. He never apologized. He never paid back the medical debt. He never told the truth. He simply moved on, dragging his lie behind him like a spotless train. And I let him. For too long I let him. Then came the invitation. Mason called me on a Tuesday night in early spring. His voice was deeper than when he lived with us, steadier too. He said he was engaged. Her name was Talia. Law student. Brilliant. Kind. He wanted me at the engagement dinner. Not as a secret guest. Not as some old family friend. As family. I nearly said no. I knew Greg would be there. Patricia too. Kendra probably glowing in something expensive. But Mason was quiet for a second and then said, "Please. I need you there." So I went. The dinner was at a private room in a lakefront hotel, 80 guests, candlelight, champagne, the kind of place where every plate is too large and every smile costs something. Greg saw me first and froze for half a second before arranging his face into polite surprise. Patricia hugged me with the stiffness of a mannequin. Kendra looked me over in one smooth sweep from my black dress to the short silver hair I had finally stopped trying to grow long again. I had earned every strand of that silver. I wore it like armor. The room buzzed with speeches and clinking glasses. Mason looked nervous. Talia looked radiant. And then, she looked at me. Not a passing glance. Real look. Focused. Like a door had just opened in her mind. I felt it immediately. Later, just before dessert, she came over and asked softly, "Elena Whitmore?" I said yes. Her eyes widened. "You're the Elena Whitmore?" I almost laughed. I had no idea what that meant. Then she said, "I interned last summer at the legal aid clinic that handled insurance fraud and wrongful termination claims. Your file was one of the training cases." My pulse kicked hard. Greg was across the room laughing too loudly at something one of his colleagues said. He had no idea. Talia leaned closer. "We studied what happened to you. The forged separation claim. The policy cancellation during active treatment. The financial transfers. The clinic used it because it was so extreme." I stared at her. "You know." I whispered. She gave a tiny nod. "I know more than that." And then she looked past me. Straight at Greg. But he didn't know one thing. Talia had spent the last year clerking for a judge who hated abuse hidden inside paperwork. When Mason tapped his glass to thank everyone for coming, Talia asked if she could say something too. The room settled. Greg smiled at her proudly. Patricia clasped her napkin and beamed. Talia stood with a champagne flute in one hand and said, "Before I marry into this family, I need to honor someone who taught me what survival really looks like." Then she turned to me. The room shifted. I could feel it. "Years ago," she said, "I read a case file about a woman whose husband canceled her health insurance while she was in chemotherapy by falsely claiming legal separation. The file described it as administrative cruelty with life-threatening intent." You could hear forks being set down. Greg's smile slipped. Kendra blinked fast. Patricia stopped breathing through her nose. Talia kept going. "Calm. Precise. Brutal. That woman paid for treatment while fighting cancer, divorce, and medical debt at the same time. She survived. She rebuilt her life. And tonight, I found out she is sitting in this room." Now everyone was staring. Talia looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Her name is Elena Whitmore." The silence that followed was thick and hot and alive. Then Talia turned to Greg. "And the man who did that to her has spent years calling himself a good husband and a good father." No one moved. Greg stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. "This is inappropriate," he snapped. But his voice was off. Too sharp. Too scared. Talia didn't flinch. Is it false? She asked. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Patricia jumped in with the usual poison. That marriage was complicated. Talia's face changed then. Harder. Complicated is forgetting an anniversary, she said. Canceling your wife's cancer coverage during chemo is abuse. A woman near the window covered her mouth. One of Greg's clients stared at him like he was a stranger. Mason looked from his father to me and I saw it happen in real time. Memory lining up. Missed details snapping together. Every weird bill. Every hushed argument. Every time Greg changed the subject when my name came up. Mason stood. His face had gone white. Dad, he said, and his voice cracked on that one word. Did you do that? Greg tried to talk around it, tried to blame finances, tried to say he panicked, tried to make illness sound like weather instead of a woman he had once promised to protect. But the room had already turned. Truth does that. Once it gets oxygen, it grows teeth. Mason stepped away from him. Patricia started crying without tears. Kendra stared down at her plate like maybe if she didn't look up, shame would miss her. It didn't. Greg left first. No speech. No defense. Just red ears, stiff shoulders, and the sound of his own image breaking behind him. Patricia followed. Kendra waited 8 seconds, then grabbed her purse and went too. No one stopped them. After they were gone, the whole room felt different, like a storm had moved through and taken the fake air with it. Mason came to me slowly, like he wasn't sure he had the right. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I looked at his face, that same boy who used to fall asleep when I rubbed circles on his back, and I told him the truth. Because I didn't want you to have to choose. He cried then. Really cried. So did I. Talia hugged both of us, and in the middle of that expensive room with the candles burning low and dinner going cold, I felt something leave my body that I had been carrying for years. Not anger. Not even grief. The need to keep his secret. That was gone. In the weeks after, Greg's world got very quiet. 2 clients dropped him. 1 board seat disappeared. People stopped inviting him places. Mason moved out of his father's house for good. Patricia called once and left a voicemail that began with excuses and ended with silence. I deleted it. I did not need her regret. I had my own peace now. And if you are listening to this while someone is treating your pain like a burden, while someone is making you feel too expensive, too sick, too broken, too much, hear me clearly. Love does not disappear when life gets ugly. Love shows up harder. Love sits in chemo chairs. Love learns the medication schedule. Love fights billing departments and brings blankets and stays. Anything else is not love. It is convenience wearing a human face. I thought cancer was the thing that almost killed me. It wasn't. Betrayal came closer. But it also taught me something I will never forget. When people reveal what they are, believe them the first time. And when you survive what was meant to destroy you, do not whisper your story to make other people comfortable. Say it out loud. Let it breathe. Let it stand in the middle of the room where everyone can finally see it. Because some people will leave you in the dark and call it fate. But the truth, sooner or later, always turns on the light. After they were gone, the whole room felt different, like a storm had moved through and taken the fake air with it. Mason came to me slowly, like he wasn't sure he had the right. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I looked at his face, that same boy who used to fall asleep when I rubbed circles on his back, and I told him the truth. Because I didn't want you to have to choose. He cried then. Really cried. So did I. Talia hugged both of us, and in the middle of that expensive room with the candles burning low and dinner going cold, I felt something leave my body that I had been carrying for years. Not anger. Not even grief. The need to keep his secret. That was gone. In the weeks after, Greg's world got very quiet. 2 clients dropped him. 1 board seat disappeared. People stopped inviting him places. Mason moved out of his father's house for good. Patricia called once and left a voicemail that began with excuses and ended with silence. I deleted it. I did not need her regret. I had my own peace now. And if you are listening to this while someone is treating your pain like a burden, while someone is making you feel too expensive, too sick, too broken, too much, hear me clearly. Love does not disappear when life gets ugly. Love shows up harder. Love sits in chemo chairs. Love learns the medication schedule. Love fights billing departments and brings blankets and stays. Anything else is not love. It is convenience wearing a human face. I thought cancer was the thing that almost killed me. It wasn't. Betrayal came closer. But it also taught me something I will never forget. When people reveal what they are, believe them the first time. And when you survive what was meant to destroy you, do not whisper your story to make other people comfortable. Say it out loud. Let it breathe. Let it stand in the middle of the room where everyone can finally see it. Because some people will leave you in the dark and call it fate. But the truth, sooner or later, always turns on the light.